Ajay Devaraj. Mr. Ajay Devaraj is an Secretary General of the Indian Wind Power Association since May 2019. Prior to this, he served in senior management positions in organizations both in India and overseas. Leveraging his past experience in business transformation, Mr. Ajay has repositioned IWPA, thus ensuring its participation and positive contribution in several policies decisions relating to the wind energy industry. Currently, IWPA represents around 70% of India's installed wind energy capacity of 39.24 gigawatts. Today, he will be talking about wind energy development in India, the way forward. So let's welcome Mr. Ajay.
Given the limited time, what I intend doing is to give you just a bird's eye view of what is going on and then to put forward some ideas about the way forward. Rather than being complete solutions, they are aimed at provoking thought, which can then be built upon. As you are aware, India reached a century recently. Gulin had mentioned it in her opening comments. Like this took place around 10 days ago when there was a call from the Secretary MNRE inviting all the associations to get together. So we did. So WIPA, IWTMA, SPDA, NSEFI, all of us got together and came up with this advertisement in all the leading dailies, basically telling the world and India that we have reached a century. Now, this accounts for about 26% of the installed capacity in the country. It's around 388 gigawatts, but 60% is still thermal. So we've had various targets. Like, 2015, India attended this Paris summit where it had set its national goals. Initially, it was 175, I think. So let's look at where we are current. Solar is at 45.2, wind at 39.6, biopower and small hydro 15.4. So 100.2 is where we are. By 2022, that figure is going to go to solar 100, wind 60, biopower, small hydro 15, total 175. And by 2030, solar is to account for 280, wind for 140, biopower and small hydro 30, total 450. And at that point in time, what is believed is that we would have 60% of the power coming from renewable energy sources. So we're talking of if 450 represents that 650, 60%, we're talking of the overall installed capacity in the country going up from that 388 that it is right now to about 750 gigawatts. Now, this has been pointed out earlier, but then still, let me just talk about it. So the installed capacity, generation and the demand, how does the thing stand? If you look at the last 3 years, the total generation in billion units, 1819, 1376.1, then went up marginally in 1920 to 1389.1, and in 2021, it has actually gone down to 1381.9. The contribution of renewable energy over here, 2019, 18-19, it was 101.8. Then it went up to 126.8, good number increase. But then the very next year, it has gone down to about 127. Now, what accounts for this thing? One is that, yes, we did have the pandemic-induced lockdowns and stuff like that. Hardly any demand from the C&I sector. So that was one. But then if you look at it in terms of percentages, like it is currently at about 9.2%. So we're saying 26% installed capacity, but the generation is around less than 10%. Now, I think it was Mr. Kashish who said that like when we reach the 60% by 2030, RE generation is likely to be about 32%. So, like, what are some of the things that we are facing by way of challenges? Like one is the demand is definitely going up, that there is no doubt at all about. There are studies that show that the thing between 2015 and 2030 is going to go up significantly, more than double or even 3 times. Now, let's look at what has brought about the current 100 gigawatts that we have achieved. One was, I would say, early incentivization through accelerated depreciation. It was 80%, it's been brought down to 40%. Then we have the generation-based incentive. Then India's commitments that have taken place at the Paris Agreement and internationally, the apparent cost advantages compared to other power sources, especially since the time we had this reverse bidding in place since about 2017-18, incentives in the form of ISTS waiver. Then, like we've had the Green Energy Exchange in operation since about June last year. Green day-ahead markets, green term-ahead markets, those things. Now, 2 days back, there was something that has come by way of a draft. RE through green through open access being allowed to green energy. More recently, you had the Prime Minister talking about energy independence to be achieved by 2047. So all these things put together probably are the drivers of growth. Now, if you look at the current state of wind energy, we have about 54.7 gigawatts likely there, 39.6 already there, 7.6 under construction. Out of the 7.6 under construction, approximately about 4.8 is likely to come online during this particular year. So the figure will go to about 44.4 gigawatts. Then we've had recent tenders, SECI Tranche 10, SECI Tranche 11 going on right now. Then, although now the ministry has come up with a thing saying that no, we are not going to talk about what tenders are coming up in the future. Like what happened a few months back was that during one of the meetings that we had with the ministry, the CMD of SECI let the cat out of the bag saying that, this is likely to be 1,200 megawatts of pure wind coming up every quarter. So that's about 3,600. He also talked of a hybrid thing of about 3,000 megawatts. So we said, okay, 50% wind. So which is why we came up with this magical figure of 54.7 gigawatts. Now, the thing is that in addition to all this, there are states that seem to be fast tracking what is happening. Like, for example, we have the case of Madhya Pradesh, which has set up a thing to facilitate the entire thing of setting up this wind energy farms in the state. So that is going to accelerate the thing of growth. We may not reach the 60 gigawatts by 2022, could be slightly short. But then let's see where we are when it moves the thing forward. Now, let's look at what we have been focusing on. One, as an association, we believe that we should be reducing risk and improving returns. So to this extent, what we have been doing is to facilitate projects that are stuck to get off the ground, talking to MNRE, talking to the state governments concerned, going down to the nitty-gritty, so to speak, to get these things off and moving. We've had some amount of success, but after several months and several rounds of talks, addressing payment delays, others have also spoken about it, liquidity injection under the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme. Then there are some states that have LCs in their this LC provision, the PPAs, but it's not something that is actually getting implemented. I mean, it's not being enforced. Then, more recently, we now have a thing called the Draft Electricity Late Payment of Surcharge Rules 2021, where after 7 months of late payment, you are at liberty to sell the park in the open market. This is still at a draft stage. One hopes it actually takes off. Then the other thing that has already been covered, honoring PPAs and announced auction results. Two things, two separate things. Like you had auctions done, results announced, and then withdrawn. I think Gujarat had that particular issue. So like that is something we're saying that look, hey, once you come up with something and you have firmed it up, you've announced, let's not go back. It creates a very bad impression on what is happening in the country. And you're definitely not going to be able to attract investments if you're going to be doing that. The other thing that we have been doing is to leverage technology. Like we have done an experiment using data modeling to forecast state load demand. We've achieved an accuracy of 98.5%. The other thing is that if one looks at the DMSM regulations, it states that forecasting is supposed to be substation wide. But then what we have done is to experiment with a model of statewide aggregation. So we've already achieved accuracy level of plus minus 5%. That's 95% we're talking about. Now we're talking of bringing the thing of the error percentage down to plus minus 3. Now, how this has helped is because with better forecasts, like the demand forecast as well as the supply side in terms of wind energy forecasting, the extent of curtailment has come down. Like we constantly complain about this thing of curtailment, but then what we have seen now is that between say July and the first few months of August, there's a huge difference between what was happening then and what is happening now. Another thing is that, like a lot of time and energy gets lost due to the thing of the turbine maintenance. So there's a pilot study underway for predictive maintenance of wind energy generators, which predicts well in advance when something requires replacement. So you can get your cranes and whatever in place much ahead of time, rather than lose the 3 months of time that goes like if you're doing it after the breakdown has taken place. New capacity additions, like one, there is this thing of 54 gigawatts possible through wind solar parks and wind solar hybrid parks. So there was a discussion paper circulated. We've already given our comments. Last week, when we met with the MNRE, what they've told us is that this is in the final stages and likely to be issued by way of a policy in the next few days. So once that happens, like probably that is some one avenue where something can get done. Then there's considerable headway made with regard to offshore wind energy in the country. Two states, Gujarat as well as Tamil Nadu, off their coasts, there seems to be a thing of a higher CUF. Like initially they said that the thing off the coast of Gujarat is likely to be coming up first. But then the way things are happening in Tamil Nadu, it looks like Tamil Nadu might win the race. So that is something that is going on. Like the idea is that you start with a pilot scale project of 1 gigawatt and then scale it up, going up to about 30 gigawatts. The other thing is that currently, all the wind projects under SECI are 50 megawatts plus. So we're now working with the MNRE on bringing out a business model for the sub 50 megawatt category. Now, why a separate business model for them? It's simply because the cost economics that drive the larger projects will not work for a smaller capacity. Then the other thing is we're working with MNRE on this thing of redoing the repowering policy that came out in 2016. So the thing is that has the potential of adding another 1.6 gigawatts. Then there are also this thing of state-specific auctions. Like if you look at what has happened all these years, I'm talking about since 2017-18 when this reverse auction started, practically all the projects are centered around either Gujarat or Tamil Nadu. So there are other states also where there is wind capacity. So that is something that we felt should be taken up. We get the point that, okay, some have higher CUF, some have a lower CUF. So what we've suggested is, okay, why don't you come up with bids for the high CUF kind separately and for the low to medium CUF separately. So the thing is that, that way things work out better. You have this thing of greater capacity additions. Lastly, like what we believe is that it is important to improve yield and quality through improving the thing of the generation. So one already talked about is hybridization of wind energy with other energy forms, including storage. One thing that has gained traction is wind plus pumped hydro. 2 states already seem to be experimenting on this. One is Andhra Pradesh, the other is Rajasthan. Then wind plus thermal, that is reverse bundling for RTC power, that's round the clock power. That's another thing that is taking place. Then, like what we have also suggested to MNRE is that you should combine wind and solar. There are 2 advantages in this. One, you get a better CUF. Secondly, what tends to happen is during the daytime, you have solar. Wind is there largely available in the evening. So the same transmission lines can be used for the daytime as well as the evening. The same infrastructure that there is, better utilization of the resources that are available. Then there are other combinations, wind plus solar plus storage, wind plus storage, etc. And as already talked about earlier by somebody else, wind giving the thing for green hydrogen. Now, on this thing of wind to hydrogen, and like there is this thing, concept called power to X, which is something that we are talking about a little more these days, like in the sense that power to be used for any other purpose. You can convert it into hydrogen. You can, say, set up an offshore plant and have, say, a desalination plant close by. The other thing that is possible is like you have these data centers, like whether it is Amazon or anybody else. Like one of the key considerations over there is like they have huge servers which require cooling space. That means a lot of energy used over there. Now, if you can have the entire thing containerized and say submerged into the sea next to the offshore energy plant, one, you provide the energy that it requires, but then at the same time, it is much lower. So these are some ideas that have been floated around. Like it remains to be seen how these things actually move forward. So with that, thank you.